Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and welcome to the Persona 5 experience. It's like the Jimi Hendrix experience, except for video games. And I am joined, as always, by Billy Ryuji Rothert.
I don't find myself to be a sort of a snarky asshole.
That sounds kind of accurate to me.
And I certainly am not a track star. But I suppose I would, if I were a character in a Persona game, I would be like the first friend that the protagonist made. Yeah. I would be the Samwise Gamgee of Persona.
Yes. All of the drama of this podcast is brought about by you and things you say. Sometimes ill-advised. You'll get to that with Ryuji. You're not there yet. But that's fine. We're also joined, as always, not actually as always, but we're joined for these episodes by Devin Yusuke DiFrancesco.
Do I have to be Yusuke? Oh man, I'd rather be Ryuji. Crud.
I'm saying you're high-minded artist.
Oh, I was thinking Yosuke? What was his name in?
Is that Yusuke? Who's the dude in Persona 5?
I know who you're talking about.
I mean,
we should have our character names more down, but that's not for this episode, so we can start next time.
Oh no. Did I screw up? Dang it.
Like I said, the names are kind of similar.
Isn't his name?
Technically, the person's whose name we're talking about will not be covered in this episode, so...
Yeah, that's true. We're getting out ahead of things. But, is that his...
I think their names are really similar. One is like Yusuke or something like that, and one is Yosuke.
Yeah, Yusuke. Yeah.
Did you say the right one?
I did.
Yeah.
Yosuke. Yosuke is the other one.
Yosuke versus Yusuke?
Yes.
That's... Okay.
That's annoying, but it's
I'd
fine.
much rather be a high-minded artist, so... And
yeah.
I definitely would ask someone to pose naked.
We will get to that, but first, since this is our first episode, we are pretty much going to be going through talking about the first dungeon, the things before the first dungeon, and that'll be just about it, because Billy has not gotten much farther than that. You might be wondering where Pete is. Pete could not get far enough in this game to participate in this podcast, so he will be joining us from episode 2 on, in all likelihood, and we will rearrange the cast of characters talking about this game as necessary. So, as we always do, just remember, if you want to get in touch with the show, at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can send us all your feedback. We've been getting some good, hey, I can't wait for you guys to talk about Persona 5 sort of feedback, so now we're doing it. So it's going to be good. So, Billy, Persona 5, what is it?
Holy shit. Okay, first things first, this is my first experience with a Persona game.
Yeah, that's actually a good question.
I take that back. I played Persona 4 Arena, the fighting game spinoff. So my knowledge of Persona games is not zero. But what's going on in this...
What is it? What is his name? The something Kingpin of Steel Sisterhood Complex?
Oh yeah, that's the main character of Persona 4. The sister complex, Kingpin of Steel
Sister
or something.
Complex Kingpin of Steel?
He kills fools.
I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
It announces each character, and I think Teddy is the Beast in Heat.
Oh yeah, definitely has the Beast in Heat.
Yeah,
all right.
So that's all you've played. You've played Persona 4 Arena a little bit. Devin, what is your familiarity with the series?
So I've played a couple dungeons into Persona 4. I've also watched the whole Persona 4 anime, so I know the story. I've played a tiny bit of Q and watched a fair amount of Q, so I know a little bit about 3's characters, and then I've also played Persona 4 Arena.
Okay. I have played Persona 3, Persona 4. I played most of Persona 3. At a certain point, the dungeon in Persona 3 I couldn't keep focused. I beat Persona 4 multiple times, I think. Or I got pretty far in Persona 4 multiple times. I've definitely beaten it. and then I've played a good amount of Persona Arena, and I started playing Persona 4 Golden a little bit, but that's pretty much my experience with the Persona series.
I forgot to mention, I've actually played a tiny bit, like maybe like 10% or so, of one of the Shin Megami Tensei games, of which Persona is a spinoff of.
Yeah, I've beaten Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner for the DS, but that is, I think, or Devil Survivor. Sorry, Devil Survivor.
I've played a little bit of Apocalypse, which is actually, I believe, a like sequel to another different one that I haven't actually played.
Great. Yeah, but those are my experiences with these games. I played quite a bit of Persona 4, which is good because Persona 5 really builds on that and not Personas 1 and 2. That would have been a real curveball. Just like, we're going back to the original. So, Billy, what is Persona 5? What are we doing here? Let's acclimate the listeners.
All right, so in Persona 5, we are introduced to an unnamed protagonist who you end up naming. First,
what are
I
your
want to
characters'
ask,
names?
Yeah, what did we name everybody?
I saw another one of our friends who's been on this podcast before, John. I watched him name his character, and I actually decided to do the same thing because I thought it was a cool idea. Apparently, there's like a companion manga for Persona 5, and so I'm just using the, like, as far as we know, canon version of the character's name, which is Akira Kurusu. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation.
What?
Akira Kurusu?
Yeah, Akira Kurusu. That sounds about right.
All right, well, I picked a very similar name to that for a completely different reason. I named my character Akira Kurosawa.
So I'm a fan of his movies.
Yeah.
My
Great films.
my character's
Seven
name.
Samurai.
My character's name is Fabulous Tucker.
Great. Wait, is it first name Fabulous,
Last
last
name
name
Tucker. Yes.
Or is it
Perfect.
like, okay.
So whenever people are talking to him, they're like, "Hey, Fabulous, what's going on?" I'm like, "Yes,
Tucker-san.
Tucker-san, what's up?" So what is the name of your Phantom Thieves gang?
Mine is Team Rocket with the hollowed out star.
Okay, that's pretty good. Billy?
I haven't decided exactly because I haven't got to that part in the game. But there are, from what I understand, 9 party members in the entire game, like up until the end. But it just doesn't sound as well. Like it doesn't sound as good calling them like the Magnificent 9. Magnificent 7 would be great, but like
You should just call yourself the Magnificent Seven and then ignore the extra members.
yeah, I guess. I mean,
Seven or
I
Magnificent.
really could do
two
that.
suck.
Or just like ignore Ryuji and one other random character.
Yeah, exactly. Just pick the 2 you dislike the most and say, you're not really in the club. My group is called the Wu-Tang, and it's made for some great screenshots that I've taken. It's pretty great. One of the characters at one point says, "The power of the Wu-Tang is far greater than even I thought." And I was like, yes, it is.
You're not wrong.
You're not
Was
wrong.
that in Anon? Was something in Anon said on the fan site?
No, that was a conversation with a character who you guys have not met yet, but it's pretty great. So, in Persona 5, you play as this nameless person who gets into trouble. He's not actually from the wrong side of the tracks. He basically gets framed for a shitty crime for like punching. He breaks up a man who is abusing a woman on the side of the road. He breaks up their situation and then punches the dude to kind of protect the woman.
He actually
And-
just pulls him off of her and he trips and then
Oh, yeah.
hits his head. So it's like a completely harmless. I shouldn't say harmless, but
The intervention
Yeah.
in no way matched the punishment. And your main character is basically sentenced to probation for a year. And because of his probation, he is transferred to a school in Tokyo where he lives with Sojiro Sakura, who is a proprietor of a cafe/curry restaurant.
And coffee.
And coffee. Coffee and curry. What a combo. and you live in his attic, and you're basically participating in a school year. Basically, as long as you keep out of trouble for a year, your record will be expunged. So that is ostensibly what you're supposed to be doing. However, this game employs a framing narrative. So at the beginning of the game, it starts you at what I presume is like the end of the game, or very close to the end of the game, and you get busted by the cops.
Right.
Trying to steal something. You don't really have the context, but you know that you get caught, and then you get arrested, you get drugged, and then you get thrown in an interrogation room, and a prosecutor comes in and starts interrogating you about everything that's happened in the game. And when that starts, you then flash back to the beginning of the year, and everything that happens in the game from that point on is flashback, kind of explaining what the Phantom Thieves were, how you operate, how you got involved in all of this, and what happened.
Other important things to note, just like about general Persona games, is that they're high school sims. And it's an interesting combo of like high school sim and monster collection.
Yes. It is high school simulation, it is monster fusing and min-maxing, but also it's kind of a dating sim. Like, you're juggling between fighting in dungeons to kind of strengthen your party and save the world, and also hanging out with friends, because hanging out with friends unlocks different social links, or in this game they're called confidants, and those unlock bonuses to your fusion and also some practical bonuses. And then also juggling just basic being a kid stuff, like studying and improving yourself in other ways. You know, maybe you're going to go eat some burgers, and that'll increase your guts, or you need to study for an upcoming test, or maybe you need to work at a store to earn some spare spending money. And so you kind of
listen to a politician so you can be more charming.
Yes. And so you're constantly juggling, and because this game takes place over around a year, every day actually counts. Every day you spend, you do not get more days. So it is about being efficient with your time. And so with that in mind, you kind of get jumped into this game. No one trusts you up front. And you go to school at, is it Yasogami High? No, that's Persona 4.
Shujin Academy.
Yeah.
Yasogami High is the Persona 4 one. Shujin Academy, you're thrown in, you're a second year. You're always a second year. And
you can't be a freshman.
Yeah, and you can't be a senior. Because you can't be taking entrance exams, I guess.
And you need to make that transition from underclassmen to upperclassmen.
Yeah, I like that it's just always, you're a perpetual junior.
Yeah.
Perpetual sophomore?
Yeah, well,
your second year?
It's second year, but there are only 3 years. High school's
in
only 3
Japan?
years. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a little weird. But at least the translation to the U.S. But once you get thrown in, you start a couple days at school. It's pretty normal at first. Actually, no, it's not.
It's not normal.
It's not normal at all at first. It's normal for like half a day. And then you start going towards school, and you end up seeing a girl basically get invited into a car by one of the teachers at your school, and then he invites you, and you cannot accept the ride, and he drives away, and it's immediately creepy. But you then accidentally activate some navigation app on your phone, and
the app shows up a bunch, and you delete it multiple times. You try to delete it multiple times, and it just keeps coming back.
Yes.
Before this, you also start having like weird dreams of the Velvet Room.
And the Velvet Room is way different from in Persona 4 and 3. So the Velvet Room is a place in these games where you can fuse your personas and strengthen yourself. It's supposed to be kind of the mechanical center of the dungeons that you interact with. It is the hub against which all dungeoneering kind of revolves. But in this game, in all those games, like the Velvet Room changes depending on what your main character is kind of up to. In Persona 3, it's kind of a room. It's actually just like a big room. In Persona 4, it's a limo because your character is supposed to be like moving towards an inescapable fate. And then in Persona 5, you're in prison. And you're in jail, and Igor, the dude in the Velvet Room, is basically...
Who has a new voice this time? New voice for Igor.
Yeah, I don't trust him. He talks about... None of the Igors in the past have talked about... Is it redemption or...
Rehabilitation.
Yes, rehabilitation. He is... He's way into rehabilitation, and it's
rehabilitation of your like rebel soul, so that you can achieve freedom again and like fight this apparently impending doom to consume the world.
Ruin.
Yeah, ruin as a result of this lack of freedom and rebellion in the world.
Yeah, I don't trust him.
Now, I have a feeling that this is actually sort of a recurring, like, major theme, not necessarily the rebellion or ruin, but like in the Persona games, this high school protagonist is aiming towards some very like fantastical self-improvement or escape from some bad thing situation that is presented in a very fantastical way at first. Is that consistent through the other Persona games?
Yeah, so in Persona 4 and 3, they tend to have different impetuses for this, other world. Whatever it is. They have different reasons for there to be demons and monsters and stuff in the world. In 3, there's a mystical 13th hour in every day, or 25th hour in every day. After midnight, there's an hour that only like people who are awakened to their personas can perceive. And during that time, monsters just kind of roam the land. And you're trying to figure out where the hell this hour is coming from and what's going on with the world. In Persona 4, there's a world inside the TV. And in that TV world, like, people get drawn in and their desires...
They appear on the Midnight Channel.
On the Midnight Channel. Their perceptions suddenly become reality. Or they become... The perceptions of the world, of the public, kind of manifest in these realms that you have to go in. And that game is a lot about, like, figuring out what the hell the Midnight Channel, what's up with that, what's up with the world inside the TV, why are people going in there? And there's also a murder mystery, like people were killed by being thrown into the TV, and you're trying to figure out solve the murder mystery. This game, the metaverse is yet another weird kind of overlap with, shadow. It's got shadows, it's got all these different familiar mechanical setups, but the explanation for why it exists is very different. Each game kind of comes up with a different reason why you'd want to use this power, why you have this power, and why you'd want to use it. So Persona 4 was a lot about like rumors and gossip. I would say was one of the main problems, that people were not living their authentic lives because of the perceptions of people around them, kind of forcing them to conform to societal norms. Persona 5 is a lot more about, like, people in positions of authority are real shitty, and no one does anything about it, because societal norms just say you can't. And so you, as this kind of extrajudicial force that can operate in unique ways, are kind of trying to set the world right by doing so. And that starts on your first day of school, when you and Ryuji, Billy's spirit animal, you start going to school and you end up in a giant, horrible castle and you get captured. It seemed like it was going to be such a normal day.
You just want to go to school on time and live an honest student life.
I do enjoy that in the top right-hand corner, it tells like what your missions are, or like your driving goals, and it's always like, live an honest life. Avoid trouble.
Obediently go to bed.
Yes. And then it's like, nah, we're gonna save the world time. And so your first day of school, you get thrown into like a horrible jail. I think. Don't you get captured like immediately and awaken to your power, or do you awaken to your power like the next day?
You awaken to your power the first time you go into the metaverse.
Okay, but Ryuji does not.
Ryuji does not. Ryuji goes in the second time, basically.
Does something happen? Like, are you and Ryuji getting captured, and then you awaken to your power and save you and him? Is that what happens?
Yeah,
I can't quite
that's what
remember.
happens.
We try to go in a second time and can't figure it out, and then we learn that it was the app that does it, and so we use the app, go in, protagonist is able to like reuse or re-summon his persona, and then along the way, Ryuji, in a moment of stress, unlocks his.
Yeah, I think in both ones that I've seen, well, of the three that I've seen, all have been like someone is being captured, and the only way for you to save yourself and your other party members is to awaken to your persona. I think that happens. I know that happens for Ryuji. I know it happens to the third party member. I don't remember exactly what happens for the main character when they awaken to their persona.
Yeah, you're captured, and Ryuji's going to get executed by. So, the first palace you get sent into is actually a volleyball teacher at your school. The dude who gave this girl a ride at the beginning of the day. Turns out the game starts with him seeming like a pretty normal dude, but it turns out he's an abusive coach who sexually assaults the female members of his team, and he runs his team like
Slave ship.
Yeah, basically like a slave ship, and he thinks that no one will stop him because he's a former Olympian and he's really good at coaching volleyball. And so
he has taken the school to like a nationally recognized level, which I'm sure is a very big deal in that kind of culture.
However, he's not a great guy. He's a really
he's
bad
not
guy.
a nice person.
And his shadow self, which in the metaverse, there are shadow versions of everyone. They are kind of the versions that express, they're kind of the id, if we're going all Freud, which this game definitely wants you to go all Freud. They're the id of each of these characters. They are the true desires of the characters in the real world, but they are not actually the people from the real world. So anything that happens in the metaverse it's not reflected in the overall behavior of the character in the real world unless you kill their shadow, in which case they lose all desires and they kind of have a mental shutdown. Whereas
I don't think we know that in where I am in the game.
We don't know that, but it seems to be.
Yeah.
We learn. I learned that, so you must have seen that at some point.
Yeah.
When did we kill someone's shadow?
You don't.
But you like Morgana, who is one of the 4 characters you play with in the first palace.
Is a cat mascot.
Cat, but also in real life a real cat, but not really. He sort of protests vehemently that he's not a cat. Morgana is a pretty crucial piece of the first 20 hours of the game because they act as your tutorial friend, and Morgana gives a lot of details about what happens when you defeat someone's shadow self in the metaverse, because you need to sort of know.
The conversation that you're referring to is talking about stealing someone's treasure, not about defeating their shadow self. I could be wrong.
Well, Morgana, when you're there, Morgana gives you like some options of what you should do. So we're getting ahead of ourselves, but
yeah.
That first day, we'll get there. Trust me, we'll get there. That first day, you get captured. The king, he's like a naked king in a Speedo, which is great. This volleyball teacher, and
he's in a Speedo and a bathrobe, right?
Yeah. He's going to execute Ryuji, your like new person who you just met. You have no idea who this dude really is, but he's going to kill him because I guess they have beef, and then you awaken to your power because you have beef with. You're like, no, don't kill this kid right in front of me. Interesting thing about you awakening to your power in this game, the main character in Persona 5, his persona is a curse type, I guess. His affinity is to dark magic and curse magic, which is very different from the kind of base personas of other games. In Persona 4, you have an electric persona. I think in Persona 3, you have a fire persona. But starting with you kind of being the evil or curse character, I think is a pretty good tonal indicator of kind of what your role is in this world. You're the darkness. You're the Dark Knight in all of this. And so
you're the trickster.
Yeah, you're the trickster.
The fool.
And so you break free, you win some battles. It turns out you, like the protagonists of all Persona games, You are the wild card, so you can have multiple personas, and that's your power. And so you get to kind of fuse personas and grow in a different way. Everyone else grows linearly, generally speaking. You kind of jump around and can have different affinities, different powers. You're basically drawing from a deck, whereas they are just one character, all your teammates. So you save Ryuji, you awaken to your powers, then you come back the next day, Ryuji awakens to his powers, and now you've decided that you and Morgana, this little cat who kind of fills the Teddy role. I'm pretty sure Morgana's going to be like Teddy from Persona 4, like in story. So far, everything is lining up so that Morgana's story explanation is very similar to Teddy's. I'm expecting it to be the same, but maybe they'll buck the trend. But the three of you keep coming back, and you've decided that what you're going to do is you need to defeat Kamoshida. And Kamoshida, you try. There's some options on what you want to do, and this is where we get to the idea of mental shutdowns. So, Devin, I believe your Ryuji mentions to Morgana, like, we've got some stuff to do. What should we do? And it's like, okay, we can either steal this dude's treasure. No, I think Ryuji's like, let's kill him. And he's like, no, don't kill the shadow. If you kill the shadow, then he'll shut down. And then he's like, what we need to do is this more elaborate thing. We need to steal his treasure, which is awesome. That's a great setup. It's just a heist. Every level is a heist movie.
Well, it kind of makes sense, and I like the idea of there being a way to ultimately achieve victory without having to murder something. A lot of the games we played this year, or on the podcast in general, where that's been a theme, achieving your goals without just rampantly murdering things. Those games have ended up doing something pretty clever and interesting. One of the ideas that this game tries to present to the player is that what we're doing in these metaverses is going into a person's subconscious. Not that different from what we try to do in like a Psychonauts game.
Yeah.
And if you're able to sort out what that person's inner demons are, they will reform or become in some ways mentally recovered or changed in a positive way. In this case, in this limited first exposure that I have of stealing Kamoshida's treasure, we would be essentially taking away that part of his psyche that makes it okay for him to like physically abuse his players and other students in the school.
Yeah, you're basically taking away his internal justification for why he's able to get away with what he's doing. And by doing so, the person no longer has the ability to justify their actions, but they still remember all the actions, so they end up confessing to their crimes because they aren't messed up anymore.
Or in some other way, reforming their behavior.
Yep. Which is awesome. We are going to make you confess with your own mouth.
So I guess, like based on where we said we would be talking about today, that's basically the overarching story. Mm-hmm. That's what we get. And I think before we jump into straight mechanics, this is quite a long game, and a lot of hours goes into just the tutorial level and the first dungeon.
Yeah, you don't... Like, 20 hours happens before you even start dungeoneering in a real way.
So that wasn't a full 20 hours for me, personally.
Or 10 or 20. It's like 10, I think.
I got through the tutorial part to the point where I entered the first Kamoshida Palace with some of my own agency at about 8 hours or so.
Yeah, I also was pretty much at 8 hours in exactly. So I think the tutorial pretty much ends in 8 hours. That's about how long it takes.
There are still tooltips and things that you get throughout the game, but you get a big piece of your training wheels taken off, which is up until you're able to first enter Kamoshida's palace, what you do with your time is very linear. You really can't make any major choices on how you spend your time. The game is almost presenting these like practice scenarios where you think you have a choice, but you don't. Just like it can condition you for the later part of the game where you are going to have to make choices. And I like that overarching point. I think in general, this was one of the best tutorials that I've actually ever played. Though I know that I was having my hand held for a large portion of the game, I didn't feel like I was really on training wheels. I felt like they were just safely limiting my options, but I still felt like I was the one progressing through meaningful story while I was learning things, things that are super important for the game. So yeah, it was an 8-hour tutorial, but it didn't feel like a tutorial level. It felt like a drawn out but fleshed out like opening narrative as opposed to a here's how you jump list of check boxes to make sure that I know before I start the game.
I thought it was really cool because one issue with Persona games is that you probably spend about half of your time in the game in a dungeon, and it's pretty different from the rest of the game. I thought it was really cool that those first 8 hours was very well paced, and that you very like commonly switched. You do a little bit of dungeon and you get some story. You do a little bit of dungeon, then you get some story. And I think the pacing in this one feels a lot better to me than 4 did personally. Though I also haven't played 4 in a long time.
Yeah, it's definitely better paced than 4, and I guess what I was thinking about during the tutorial of this game was I was thinking mostly about Final Fantasy 13, which is a game that is held up as kind of an emblem of bad tutorializing. It has almost a 20-hour tutorial, and by 20-hour tutorial, I don't necessarily mean that you're the whole time is like, press blah to blah, but there's a lot of just linear progression, and they don't open up the leveling system until quite a bit later into the game, and you don't get to pick what your party members you have for quite some time. And I was thinking, 8 hours of tutorializing in Persona 5 is actually still quite a lot. I mean, it's less than 20, but it's not that much less. It's half. It's not like it's 2 hours of tutorial or something. But I think what made it work for me in Persona 5 when it didn't in FF13 was that this game is constantly just giving you story, and it's explaining things, and it's fleshing out the world. A lot of the tutorialization is how does the world work, and what justifies it. Not so much, here's how the mechanics work, and here's how you're going to play. And so because there's this steady unfurling of story explanation, it's keeping you engaged, even though the gameplay might not be as dynamic as it might be in the near future. And I guess for me, I just felt that the tutorial was even longer than that first 8 hours, because even though you're able to make choices from, the moment you can start deciding when to go into Kamoshida's castle versus do other things, the choices you're allowed to make at that point are very limited because you've only made like one or two. You can only really make one friend. I think you've got Ryuji. Maybe you can hang out with Sojiro.
No, I think you can hang out with the doctor.
Okay, yeah, you can hang out with her, but you need to get your guts up before you can hang out with her.
I think you can do the first one before that.
Yeah, but you can unlock. But then you're blocked. You can't.
Yeah.
You
so you
can't
can only
hang
do
out
the
with her
first
again.
level of her, I believe.
Yeah. Which is very different from in other Persona games where generally the blockers start later. And by blockers, I mean confidants that require certain amounts of personal traits, because your character, on top of having levels that you're gaining when you go into the dungeon, you have 5 character stats that form in like a little star. And the stats are guts, which is kind of the analog to courage from Persona 4. There's kindness, charm, knowledge, and proficiency. And all 5 of those kind of gate you in different ways. Like there's some people that won't hang out with you unless you have a certain amount of knowledge, or there's certain places you can't go unless you have a certain amount of charm. And so early on in Persona 5, there are more people that you just can't hang out with because you're not cool enough yet, or you're not tough enough. Whereas in 4, they gave you like 3 or 4 social links that unlocked chronologically, and then you could just do them whenever you want.
Do we want to explain the social link concept a little more, since we just talked about it a bunch?
Sure. So in Persona 5, and in most of the Persona games, 3 forward, there are a bunch of characters that you can kind of befriend and choose to hang out with instead of pursuing these larger save-the-world sort of things. But the game strongly incentivizes you hang out with them because you will unlock additional abilities, you'll unlock experience boosts when you fuse personas. So one of the main ways you improve your character is by taking some of your weak personas and then fusing them together to make stronger ones. And when you are, every persona has a kind of tarot card that it aligns with. So your character is the Fool, Ryuji is the Chariot, An, who's the fourth member of your party, who joined your team, she is the Lovers, and each of these different characters aligns with a tarot card, and then the personas you fuse also align with tarot cards. And if you fuse a persona whose tarot card matches one of your friends, depending on how deep your friendship is with that person, they will get an experience boost on fusion that will just make them stronger. So it basically invalidates a bunch of grinding. It strongly incentivizes you spending your time hanging out with friends instead of just grinding away in dungeons, because the amount of experience you get from those fusion experience bursts tends to be significantly higher than the experience that you just get from fighting, which I think is a really interesting mechanical metaphor. Like, hanging out with friends is more important than doing this crazy extra world stuff. Your normal life is as important as this other stuff.
Importantly, your social links, and you can imagine a game similar to this, primarily having your party members be the people that you grow close to. One thing that is really important in Persona is it's not just your adventuring party that you're growing close to. You're actually growing close to all these people, all these mentors or mentees, depending on who the character is, depending on the game. You're growing close to community members. You're growing close to your doctor. You're growing close to the person you buy your guns from. You're growing close to the guy that you're living with. I think that's a really critical component, that it's not just the other player analog like party members, that it really is more than that.
Yeah, and in this game, it's a lot more all of the different people you're going to hang out with, there's this predication that your relationships have to be based around some sort of agreement, which is very different from Persona 4. You have to have some sort of formal arrangement with this person before your kind of social link, in this case your confidant, is unlocked, which it makes these relationships a lot more transactional than in Persona 4, or they are transactional by nature. Like, you can't hang out with the doctor until you've struck up a bargain to try medicine for her. You can't start hanging out with An until you say, I'm going to help you, I think, get over your friend. One of her friends, one of the impetuses for...
We can maybe talk about that later.
Yeah, dealing with Kamoshida kind of...
I think we should pause that part.
Yeah. But you have to kind of form these bargains with people, which I think is a pretty different framing device for what these friendships are supposed to be. And also Igor kind of says, you need to make these friendships that will... like fuel the flames of your rebellion. And so he's much more heavy-handed about, you need to make you need to add some goons to help you with this task, and it makes everything feel a little bit more icky. I don't know if you guys felt that as well.
It felt way more like I was coming up with a team. I don't know if it felt as icky to me as you, but it definitely felt like maybe the flashbacks made me feel this way, but often when we would flash back, because I think a lot of times when you get a new social link, you get a flashback, and I can't remember her name. Is her name Sai, the prosecutor? I'm not even sure her name is.
Sai or Sai. It's spelled
Sai.
S-A-E.
Sai.
Yeah. Sai would often say something like, you had to have some adult that lived with your home that was helping you out. Was like the guy that took you in, was he a part of your band? So it felt to me more like I was developing a team of people that were trying to take on the world, more than it felt like a transactional relationship. But now that you do mention that, maybe I just kind of missed the transactional aspect of it. I haven't unlocked as many social links as you have. I just haven't noticed that pattern as much.
Yeah, it's mostly, I think, a little bit in the phrasing of when you unlock personas. I just remember in Persona 4 and 3, the way that they describe social links is a lot more like, this social link will help you grow, and it will aid you on your journey. And this one is a lot more, the verbiage that they use is a lot more pointed.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Billy, you wanted to say something?
I haven't experienced a transactional nature. Again, I'm still I've only gotten 4 party members out of 9. But if I had to extrapolate what I've experienced right now into future parts of the game with the best sort of prediction I can, I would say that to me it feels like the game is just trying to make things a little more clear, and maybe it comes off as being transactional in nature because it seems like I do this for you, I join your party, but in some other areas where the game presents you a text choice, it can be really unclear what the right answer is. And I'm thinking about an example now where you're essentially acquiring your personas through having a conversation with them in battle. We'll probably touch on that more later, but that's an area where the dialogue options are in no way clear at all. But I think when it's something as important to the core experience of the game as building relationships and forming the party, I'm not going to hold it against the game for being a little more direct with their approach to party building and relationship management.
Oh, I'm not holding it against the game. I'm saying it's an interesting difference between it and the games before it, between Persona 5 and Persona 4 and 3. It's just a different framing, and I bet it's intentional. Just like Igor having a different voice and you being a prisoner instead of a guest. I'm sure that these differences are intentional.
I think Igor having a different voice is less of an intentional framing choice. I think the guy that did Igor is either dead or...
The guy in Japan who did Igor's voice passed away.
Yeah.
But
so maybe not the English version.
I don't believe the English version.
Got
and the tone is so different from 4 and 3 that I am pretty sure that there's a reason.
No, you're probably right. I read the thing about the guy's voice dying. I think it was the Japanese version, so it's not actually as relevant for the English version.
Yeah, you guys haven't maxed out personas yet, or social links yet, but I have maxed some out, and the verbiage for when you max out a social link is real different from in 4. And
I had never maxed out. I didn't get far enough in 4 to max out a social link there either, so I wouldn't know.
So we will discuss that later because you guys haven't seen it yet, but the verbiage there is even more pointed. So I guess what other mechanical stuff do you want to hit on now before we go back to the kind of the main story?
I had one mechanical hiccup that kind of hit me pretty hard in the early part of the game, and just in casually talking with Devin about this, he says that this is a pretty rare thing to happen, but what happened to me was when I first got the tutorial on fusing personas, which is where you can basically take a persona, combine it to make a new or powerful persona, I explored that a little bit. I actually went through the first part of the game once I learned how to essentially catch and harness the personas to use them myself. I caught like every single one available, so I was really happy. I was like, man, great start. Like I have done this really efficiently in a game where doing things efficiently is a really big achievement. And so I got ready to fuse my first personas, and I had a couple things set up. I was like, great, I've got a really good combo set up. I can definitely like advance myself and have one really good persona. I forget what the exact combination was, but it used 4 of my personas. I had essentially, though you will think that I'm bonkers for doing this, I had to actually grind a little bit to make it work because I needed the protagonist to be a certain level before I could activate this persona. Or fuse to this persona, because like you're capped at how big you can craft personas by your own character's level. So I grinded just a little bit till I got up to a new level, and I fused the personas. And when I got to the last stage in the fusion, the game through some RNG made my persona fusion fail, and I got some random different persona that was of a similar caliber and nature. But what I was bummed about the most was it didn't have any of the inherited abilities. It randomly just gave it like some base ones, and quite a bit of work that I put in to the early part of the game was lost. And I actually tried to reload my save and messed up the UI and actually saved my game. So it was like locked in. And I was like, oh great, nice. I just shot myself in the foot hard. Apparently Devin told me just sort of casually, I don't know if we fact checked this super hard yet, but that's like a really, really rare thing to happen. Has it ever happened to you yet in the game, Gino?
I'm more than 40 hours in, and it has never happened to me.
Yeah, so
has it happened to you in previous games? Because fusion failure has been a thing in every game.
Yes, it has happened. It happened to me in Persona 4 like once, and it was kind of funny.
Yeah. So over the entire course of your 4 playthrough and your 5, it's only happened once. I mean, it is exceptionally rare from my understanding. I don't know the percentages though.
It's like bonkers, I guess, that it happened to me like the 3rd time I tried to do a fusion, and I was in my first dungeon, and it basically ate up all my personas that I captured and gave me one that wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a bad persona, but like I had a lot of intentionality in the first like 2 hours of the game, and then I just got betrayed by RNG. Now, it taught me a lesson to now be like a save scummer and make sure that I save the game before I do that, so that if it fucks me over again, I can just reload.
And to have 2 active files that should have also been.
Yeah, just always have to have 2 active files so that I bounce back and forth.
I only have 1 active file. I live dangerously.
Yeah, I definitely have 2 active files.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because in Persona 4, fusion is like 2 tarot cards that get put on top of each other and then they combine into 1 tarot card. In Persona 5, you put your 2 personas or however many you're gonna fuse in. They get covered in robes and chains, garbs, and then they get put under a guillotine and get their heads chopped off and then they fuse. What happens when you goof? Because when you goof in Persona 4, he puts the cards together, and then like instead of the new card just like poofing, and then you get the persona, like the card falls to the floor, and he like kind of bends over and picks up the new card, and it's like, oops, wrong thing, bad fusion.
Yeah. So in this, what happens is you watch the guillotines fall, and they kind of get stuck. So.
Do they get stuck on the personas' bodies?
No, they get they don't fall all the way. They fall like 20% of the way, and then they get like caught.
Okay.
And for anyone who knows any history about guillotines, normally if the guillotine fails, that was supposed to be like a sign from God that that person was actually innocent, and you had to spare their life. But no, the 2 like jail keepers pull out a couple of chainsaws and do a slop job on them, and then you get some randomly generated persona of like equal level, but without any of the inherited abilities that you wanted to plan so nicely.
Yeah, the fusion is really important in the inherited abilities, and that whenever you make a new fusion, you can usually select a couple of the abilities you had before. So that's really cool. But I do, in the vein of conversation we had earlier about intentionality in the developers of this game, it felt in Persona 4, I had a very different feeling towards my personas than I have in 5. In Persona 4, I really did feel like my personas were like my buddies, but almost my Pokemon. They really did feel not as connected to me as my Pokemon, but almost. They felt very much like they were helping me out, and they were my pals. In this game, I'm just using these horrible manifestations of whatever. I have to talk to them and they're rude to me and they're just awful. And then I heartlessly chop their heads off and combine them. I feel very, very different relationship between me and my personas than I felt in other games.
In this game, once you chop their heads off, the magical fireworks that shoot out of their necks all kind of spaghetti around and make a new persona.
Yeah, in 4, I definitely had some personas that emotionally I was more attached to than their stats would dictate I should be. But in Persona 5, look, if a persona has outlived its usefulness, I'm going to fuse... You haven't seen... There are other... You eventually get other, torture devices that you can use in order to perform different rituals, and some of them...
Is it just purely aesthetic, or do they have actually different implications?
They have different implications. Okay. They do different things. And so when you get access to those...
I have an idea, because I feel like it's probably going to be a lot of the same ones we got in 4.
I don't remember in 4.
So later in the game, when you just put 2 personas in a blender... that's a whole different... You could put 2 of the same personas in the blender and you get a different persona smoothie afterwards?
No, the different rituals they have functions beyond fusion. They do different things.
I'm
We can talk about that
hoping.
more later
We can
about.
talk about
Yeah,
that more when you get access to it. But
yeah.
let me just say, I am a more ruthless about about freeing slots. Sometimes, look, my heart only has room for 12 personas right now. And one of the 12 is the weakest. And you have two options. You can either get rid of them by deleting them from your mind and getting no value, or perhaps you can get some value out of them a different way.
So I'm at the stage of the game right now where I cannot get any value for trying to remove a persona from my list, almost as if I wasn't meant to have a team like this. But I have quite a few personas that are all like pushing against my character's upper limit, and they're all of different kinds. And I actually feel more limited because since that first botched persona situation, I lost quite a bit of my elemental ability. There's like 8 or 10 different elemental affinities or weaknesses in this game, and being able to appropriately address any enemy that you come across is a big deal. And I lost basically like 40% of my elemental magic like available to me because I have a full roster of personas. They're all kind of not that great, and I don't have any way of effectively getting rid of them unless I just delete them for no value and like start over, which I don't want to do. So I'm a little bit bummed at that mechanical point. I feel like I'm just going to eventually have to, and I don't want to say grind because grinding in this game is so, like, would probably tax you so much, but I've found ways to do it kind of effectively. I think I'm just going to like resign myself to maybe just like delete a couple of these personas and start
Yes.
fusing the way I actually want.
Yeah, what you need to so early on in the game you are going to be much more constrained than you will be later on, and that is by design. You are always going to feel like you are hard capped because your level is just 1 or 2 levels too low to get whatever the next persona you want, and that is kind of the deviousness of the loop of Persona 5. But when it comes to freeing up slots, your main character kind of needs to be the jack of all trades, capable of dealing with every enemy that presents itself, because even when you max out your roster, there will be enemies that only your character can really deal with effectively. And so, or in a timely manner. So
Right.
you generally want to have access to at least one ability of every type so that you can exploit elemental weaknesses, which means, yeah, that value's gone, but in Persona 5, you have a compendium that keeps track of kind of the latest, most powerful iteration of any given persona you have access to. And so as long as you're constantly registering your personas to make sure that you have a kind of save state of
Right.
each persona type, you can always get it back. And
I
money
like
is
that.
not a problem in this game.
Yeah, I like that, and I plan on using that quite a bit because I am going to want, like, if I had done this before I made um my really good persona that failed, and I might have, if I go back and look, I might have actually registered it, so I could do it again, but
You could.
I'm almost certain that I can, so I'll look into it. I didn't think about that, but it might be available still. So
Yeah. And another thing worth mentioning is that when you socialize with other characters, you get bonuses for having a persona of their type in your roster at the time. So if you're going to hang out with Ryuji and you have a chariot persona in your 6 personas, you will get additional bonuses for saying the right things to Ryuji. You'll get like 1 extra pip of relationship point.
money.
Yeah. So
it's like
it
right
strongly
now-
behooves you to have a persona of whoever you're socializing with. And so it forces you to kind of constantly churn so that you have the right people.
4 out of the 6 personas that I have are for characters I don't even have yet. So that's why I'm kind of like bummed a little bit. Now,
Yeah,
getting
early
off
on in
that,
the game, you're kind of hamstrung in that way.
yeah, I want to talk about something different, which is a very small slice of a bigger part of the game, which is time management. I know enough about Persona games to know that time management is a huge aspect of the game because you have essentially limited days to play, limited slices of time as a resource in this game. It's I can't think of other games that do something similar to this. Like Pikmin kind of does it, like kind of weirdly. Like Pikmin's very similar in that you have a very limited number of days to accomplish certain important tasks. To a much lesser extent, games like games like Harvest Moon or Animal Crossing have some very loose time constraints, but you can almost mitigate those entirely by just not being obviously wasteful about your time. But in Persona, you have to really have a lot of intention with how you spend your time. So this is where I wanted to circle back to grinding a little bit and how I like it, but it also has uncovered a part of the game that I'm not really a fan of, which is how you run out of steam in combat. So the game tries to prevent you from just grinding away at levels because you will eventually run out of steam in a dungeon. You can't just keep grinding away.
Yeah, you will eventually run out of SP, which is kind of the gating tool. It's your magic equivalent, and eventually your characters will just run out of it. And healing items that heal SP are rare, and you can't get them easily. Like, you eventually gain access to ways to create some, but creating SP items also takes time. So you generally cannot stay in dungeons. In Persona 4, there was a fox who would sell you drugs, and that fox would allow you to stay in dungeons basically indefinitely, but Persona 5 does away with that. So you have to be extra efficient. Generally, I get away with this. Later on, you can kind of mitigate this by speccing in certain ways and constructing your party properly and kind of mixing up your characters. But early on, you definitely have to manage how much time you're going into dungeons. And this game strongly incentivizes you to be in dungeons as few days as possible. Because anytime you're in a dungeon, that gets rid of both your after school and your night. There are basically 2 time slots for hanging out or improving yourself in any given day. And the dungeon will take up both. Whereas if you hung out with a friend or read a book or went to study at a cafe, that will take up 1 time slot, and then at night you could, go see a movie or hang out with different people. And there are different activities that are available at different times. So you generally want to balance stuff, and the dungeon just stops that whole thing.
So what I learned that I could do is, and this has only happened once, but I am also trying to minimize how many days I spend in dungeons. But let's just say so there's parts in the game in the dungeons where you get to these safe rooms where you can sort of talk to your party, and one of the dialogue options is, hey, how far along in the dungeon do you think we are? And usually you'll get a general idea of oh man, we're right at the beginning still, or we're about halfway through, or we're getting close to the end. And I got to a point in the game where the character said, hey, we're about halfway through, and then I got a very hard reminder hey, we're halfway through, shit's gonna get real, you better make sure you're ready to move forward in the dungeon. And I said, oh, that's probably a cue for me to say no and come back when I'm at full steam. This happened in Kamoshida's palace. It was right at the halfway mark. You fought a big mini halfway point boss, or mini boss, and I recognized that the game was going to do that to me, and I said, I've got maybe 20% of my SP left across all my characters. I'm going to go back to the start of the dungeon and just grind through to maximize the levels in EXP that I can possibly get. And it got to the point where I was just melee attacking and firing guns because that's all I had left. I was just trying to drain my characters for absolutely everything they were worth, to the point where they were almost getting killed in combat. And then I was like, great, I'm 100% spent. Now, part of me likes that because I know that as the grind father, I maximized my EXP harvest from that day. But I also wish that I didn't have to do that math, because if you are going to do a dungeon that takes you 3 days, you would feel way better about it taking 3 full days and you get tons of EXP than 2 full days and oh man, I only needed to do 3 rooms on my 3rd day, but it ate that whole day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the juggling that you have to do. There's constantly a calculus of can I get through this dungeon in this day? Kind of go into the dungeon and you're using your different experience and stuff like that. At the end, you have to send a calling card, which kind of causes the treasure to materialize, which is an awesome touch also. But that calling card send will eat up a day. It will send you immediately home, and then the following day you will have to go into the dungeon. So it eats up 2 days. However, you can, before you go into the kind of the final scenario, you can create tools. There are some things you can do at night, so it's not completely wasted. But that afternoon will be spent sending the calling card. So there is an element of like knowing, well, I'm towards the end of the dungeon, but I'm going to spend X number of days just kind of with the mechanics of closing out the dungeon. They have to play out this way. But as you get further in the game, you get more and more tools to kind of mitigate time suck and to spend more time in dungeons and to be more efficient. Like
it's true.
It
like
comes.
If there ever becomes a time that I could purchase items that will let me refill my SP, and I think that will happen eventually, I would pay any cost to do that if it makes me able to manage my time well enough in a dungeon that I can more like easily optimize what I want to do. Like I've only found items that are SP refills, and right now they're like mithril like valuable to me right now, because I'm like, I'm never going to use this until I know that I absolutely have to, or it will save me an entire day's worth of time.
Yeah, and that will be the case for quite some time. But as you unlock more and more confidants, they will give you more and more tools to stay in dungeons and do different things.
Right now, I know that the game is conditioning me and giving me tools to like spread out the balance, like the baton pass ability. If you can trigger a one more, which is when you target an enemy's weakness and perform like a knockdown or a stun, you can keep chaining together all these attacks, which if you do it inefficiently will just drain one of your characters. But if you can do this ability called a baton pass, you can link together your one mores across multiple characters and sort of spread out the work they have to do, and that's made things a lot easier.
Yeah, and as you get more characters in your party, the baton pass ability is pretty critical because it allows you to, like you said, spread out the SP, but also it gives the character who you're passing the baton to a bonus to damage and to healing if they're going to heal, and it doesn't eat up their turn. So it basically just gives your free turn to a different character and makes them more effective during that turn. And as you kind of fill out your party and get more characters with that ability, you will eventually be able to just do the full chain. Like, I start it, baton pass to someone, they keep it going, baton pass to a third person, they keep it going, baton pass to the last person, and then it's just murder time.
And if you get everybody in your opposing enemy team lineup knocked down, you initiate a hold up.
Which is awesome.
It's really cool. You can do 3 different things. You can either just keep the fight going and back out, which is always the wrong choice. Or you can do like an ultimate move that almost certainly will kill everybody on the lineup and the random encounter, if it is, in fact, sort of a basic random encounter. Or you can converse with the enemies and get them to give you money, an item, or join you as a persona if they're a new one for you. I think this is actually a great example of like ludonarrative synergy, where the game's story says you should get with your friends, you should build relationships because they'll make you a better person, they'll make you be able to face things in your life a lot better. And in the actual combat of the game, you're way more powerful when you can synergize and combo off of your teammates.
Yeah, and you're way more powerful when you can talk to these different enemies and convince them to join your side. And I gotta say, in the other games, the like all-in attack when all the enemies are knocked down, that's pretty cool, but it adds an extra something when you draw guns on these like downed enemies, and it's like, what are we gonna do, boss?
And if I remember correctly, the talk thing is new from like
yes.
I think it's the
from earlier in the
Shin
series.
The Shin Megami Tensei game that I played had it, but the Persona games I played before have not had it.
I believe Personas 1 and 2 both have the demon negotiation mechanic. It went away in 3 and 4, and it's back in 5. And the demon negotiations, they're cool. I like. There is some rhyme or reason to what you should tell these demons. It's based on their natures. Certain demons are timid. Some of them are irritable. Some of them are like flirty. And depending on what their personality type is, they will like to hear different things. And if you tell them the right thing, they join you.
One thing I think is really fun is prior to when the persona joins you, it has a different name. It just like kind of describes what it is. And I think this is something Gino wants to touch on later, but two of my favorites have been the Bedside Brute and the Twilight Prostitute. Those are pretty great.
Yep. Yeah,
the
names are great.
Is that what Incubus and Succubus turn into?
Yep. I mean, you do fight a dick monster in
Incubus is definitely a dick monster.
I mean,
no, not that one. There's another one in Kamoshida's palace that's actually just a dick.
What is that? What's the name of it?
I forget what it's like. Its name. It's one of the mini bosses. It's been in multiple Persona games.
I must have fought it and I've just forgotten or didn't notice that it was actually just a penis.
Yeah, it was just a dick, but it's been in multiple Persona games. It's always a late game Persona, but I forget what its name is. I'll look it up because I didn't expect to see it so early because it's usually a late game like powerful thing, but it was pretty funny. But yeah, the different names are always interesting. It's a different way of handling stuff. But yeah, negotiations, they're pretty good. I enjoy that when you do the all-in attack, depending on who executed it, you get a different screen at the end of the game, at the end of the fight, and they kind of pose and look all badass. And Morgana's is by far the best so far for me.
Yeah, I like Morgana's a lot. I really like that Ryuji, since he is incompetent, like flops over in the middle of his. That I really enjoy that.
Ryuji landing on his face is pretty good, but there's nothing quite like Morgana landing in a chair with a cigar. Just enjoying it, drinking it all in.
Pretty great. It's pretty great.
Yeah, the Ons is fine. And I guess we can start talking about this. Well, let's finish mechanical stuff. Is there anything else we haven't touched on? We talked about demon negotiations. We talked about fusion. We talked about the social links. We talked about boosting your stats. Oh, have you boosted any of your character's stats beyond level 1?
Are you talking about the social stats?
Yes.
So I have everything but charm at level 2 right now. I don't know if I'm ahead or behind the curve.
I'm on level 1s across the board right now, but I've gotten quite a few like musical notes. So I should be hitting one of these things soon.
Yeah, I didn't like how I was basically bound by guts for quite some time. Like I felt like I couldn't hang out with people for quite a little while early on.
Yeah, I was surprised. It seemed like Owai, who's the gun person, I think I need like Dauntless Guts. I don't know what level that is, but it seems I feel like that's a high one.
It's level 4.
Yeah.
You can't hang out with him for quite some time.
I'm surprised that it's so early on, like, let me start talking to him, but it was like, LOL, not really.
Yeah. They definitely make it clear to you early on that you're going to need to boost these stats. And I get that. And now that I realize that this game is longer than I thought it was, that I think it ends up working out fine. But you definitely want to invest your time into boosting those stats pretty early.
How close are you to getting maximum of like social links? Because honestly, everything else is kind of important to me, but the thing I really want to do in this game is get all the social links as close to max as possible. How close are you, Gino?
To getting all of them maxed?
Yeah.
I'm more than 50% of the way on almost all of them, but I haven't unlocked every social link yet.
Oh, wow.
So I've maxed out 4, I think. 4 social links, and then I've got a bunch of them near like 50%, and a couple that are like just about finished, but I still haven't unlocked 2 that I know of.
Our friend John, who also played this game, he was able to max out every single one. I doubt I'll be able to, but I hope I do.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be able to max out every single one, but it really accelerated later on in the game. At first, I thought I would never be able to do it, and then there are some social links that greatly increase your likelihood of doing that.
One thing
And
that I
maxing them out
do
really
find kind of makes me a little bit anxious is I have a hard time remembering all the special stuff because there's a special place you can buy a drink that costs like 5,000 yen and permanently gives you like a stat boost. And there's like a couple other places that it's like you get extra bonus stuff if you do this today. And it is a little bit difficult for me personally to remember all the different events that I can do based on each day.
Yeah, on Sundays you get a special smoothie that you can get, and that's just basically 5,000 for a free stat point. It doesn't take up time. I think on Mondays and Tuesdays you can go to a bathhouse near your place, and you get extra charm for going on those days. You can go to different movie theaters. You can, on days when it's raining, you get bonus like knowledge for studying at a cafe. There's a whole bunch of mechanics, and it definitely is daunting. Eventually, you'll kind of figure it out, but until you just put in the time, it's definitely a lot to manage. And I will say the smoothies are just free points, so it's worth it. It's also, if you haven't started taking care of your plant in your room, you should take care of your plant. That's free kindness. The earlier you start, the better.
I did it once, and then I was like, oh man, I need to keep doing it, and I forgot to buy more food. I need to just buy like multiple stacks of the thing so I can't forget about it.
Yeah, and do not skimp on your plant. Go to the underground mall, buy the good stuff. That will get you more points of kindness than if you buy the cheap stuff. Buy the good fertilizer. Billy, buy the good fertilizer.
Okay.
Buy the good poo.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other major mechanics. Overall, the aesthetics of this game are great. I like the aesthetics of Persona 4 Arena, and of what little I have seen of Persona 4. Anyway, I think that Persona 5 definitely does not fail to deliver on cool aesthetics. This is one of my favorite like UIs and menu setups. I think Devin also mentioned that this was.
I was really surprised because I felt like 4 was a really fun game, but I did feel like I also played it kind of like late in like PS3's the time frame was when I started playing my first Persona game. So it was like more than a generation back when I started playing it on the PS2. So that might have been why it felt so like it was a great game, but the menus and some of the other things just felt very bad. So it was kind of like I was like kind of forcing myself to play sometimes, I felt. But this game is just incredibly smooth. It's just like such a joy to play. In terms of like not the gameplay itself, but the like supporting like glue around the game.
Yeah, the presentation is on point.
Bubblegum and shoestrings are 10 out of 10.
Yeah, every time a battle ends and my party's just like my main dude like waves the party forward and they all just follow along with him and he like runs and it shows you all the stuff that you got. Or you go into your menus and it's like equip, and then your character points a gun at the screen, and he's showing your equipment.
It reminds me a lot of like a Capcom game. It definitely doesn't skimp on the flair, like a Beautiful Joe or a Devil May Cry or something like that. It has a little bit of that familiarity to me, and I know that this is probably just a different take on the same theme, but this game feels very jazzy, cool anime.
This game is. They will probably make an anime of this game. They made one before.
Yeah, probably.
This game will be an anime. In fact, some of the cutscenes are just straight up anime.
You're right.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say, especially for me, this was more of a thing in 4, but I feel like it will happen to me in 5 as well. I am usually someone who video game music is not super important to me, but all the music in 4 just like really resonates with me. Like whenever I even hear music that kind of sounds similar to Persona music, I'm like, oh man, it's Persona music. And I feel like 5, I haven't quite played it enough for this to happen yet, but I do feel I'm gonna have a similar thing of just any time Persona music plays, I'm just gonna feel like warm inside.
Yeah, one complaint. So I got to bring this up. My wife hates the Persona 5 music with such a fiery passion now because unlike Persona 4 had a couple of different songs, like there was a different song at school, different song after school, different song at night. The songs in Persona 5, there is like an acoustic version or an instrumental version of this kind of slow song, and then at night there's just a person who sings this slow song, and it's the same song. One's just instrumental, one is not. And the battle music is pretty repetitive too. So the battle music and the kind of hanging out with friends music, when she gets home, if I'm playing Persona 5, she gets very mad at the music.
Good to know that it was not quite as strong as 4 because I haven't played enough of 5.
I think four's music is probably better, but 5 is still good. It's just if you're not down for 100 hours of the same 3 to 4 songs, I'm down for that. I'm that kind of crazy.
Well,
But
you play Final Fantasy games.
yes, other people in my life less so. It's causing tension, is what I'm saying.
There
But
are
we'll get through this.
marital problems arising from Persona. That's what kind of game this is. It can cause marital problems.
Yes, it's the type of game that it causes marital problems, and you choose to work through them instead of stopping playing. It makes us grow as a couple, is what I'm saying. So, I guess we can wrap up the Kamoshida stuff, and then we're good with our first episode. I guess there's the moment Shiho, on your fourth party member's friend, attempts to commit suicide, and that's messed up, and that kind of forces On to join your party. She's your fourth member, and turns out in Kamoshida's mind, On is like his sexy lady friend who's like totally in love with him, and that's super gross because she's a minor. And
Yeah,
he's not.
I was really surprised by just how heavy and intense this game just like started off all the way. Just the very first thing that you do as a character is you're like trying to stop someone from getting sexually harassed and then get in trouble for it. And then the very next thing is like you're seeing all these people that are beat up, just like straight up beat up, and you'll like see them get more beat up as things happen in the story. And then like Kamoshi just trying to like coerce people into having sex with him, and then they specifically say that the girl who commits suicide, like they're not, she doesn't actually commit suicide, but the person who jumps, the reason she jumped is because she had to take Anne's place, and we don't ever really hear about whether or not she did actually go through with having sex with him, but Anne was basically saying that like she was gonna have to have sex with him, and then when she turned him down, Shiho took her place, so it's kind of heavily implied that she may or may not have been raped.
Yeah,
And
and
it's just crazy heavy.
like in the palace, there's like rooms full of topless women, topless girls, and like structures that are made out of women just kind of holding stuff up. And this game gets real intense real quick. And everyone is like whispering about these things happening, and there's a period where you're investigating what's going on, and you're like asking people, "Hey, why are you covered in bruises and bandages?" Well, I just practiced really hard, and it rung a little bit true, like the idea that these people would be hiding and covering for their very popular, well, not popular, but very successful coach, because he's dangling kind of college recommendation letters basically over their heads, kind of being this monster in this little fiefdom.
For me, the whole scenario of the perviness of the teacher, where originally was presented as kind of a joke and something to sort of, I don't know if joke's the right word, but they took it pretty light, like a pretty light-hearted view on the sort of sketchiness, perviness of this volleyball coach. And then when a student attempts to commit suicide or does as serious enough cry for help as throwing themselves off of the roof of one of the buildings of the school, now the game was sort of like walking this really fine line, and I think it messed up a little bit because it didn't change its tone. It kept up with the sort of lighthearted perviness of that character, and the tones of the game really didn't change to reflect that. And I think it flew a little bit too close to the sun with this because you don't bring up like someone attempting suicide for a potential sexual assault, but still have those themes be kind of in a flashy, cartoony, upbeat tone like it does throughout the rest of Kamoshida's Palace.
Yeah, I that's where I get torn. Is they're making this comment that Kamoshida's lust and his ogling eye is something to be frowned upon, and then when An transforms into her form, she's in a skin-tight leather suit that for some reason has zippers basically over her breasts and then a zipper down the middle, which I don't know why you would need 3 zippers like that, but sex. And she's got a tail.
It's like a zipper suit that kind of would open up like the mouth of the alien from like the Alien movies. It kind of like would flower open, and like besides the fact that it's very much accentuating the feminine form in a way that I think is more objectifying than a stylistic choice, I don't want to consider the logistical implications of putting on or taking off that suit. Thank God there's just some magical bullshit of personas just
boom, you're in those clothes.
Yeah, boom, you're in these clothes. I mean, Bayonetta's clothes made more sense than these. I mean, Jesus.
And it's just odd that the game simultaneously denigrates Kamoshida and holds him as an example of everything that's wrong, and then at the same time is just so horny the whole time.
I did think that there's a moment where you and An like have a private conversation about exactly what's going on with her and Kamoshida, and I actually thought that was handled very well. To me, the only jarring part for me was her suit. That was the part to me. I thought the comical aspects of Kamoshida's palace, for the most part for me, it was more of like driving home how distorted Kamoshida is. But I definitely will agree that Anne's suit is a bit much given the theme of the very first dungeon.
Yeah, it's weird that she somehow becomes as sexualized in her impact, because I know that the story justification is that it's her own vision of who she is, like it's her vision of empowerment. It's supposed to be empowering,
like taking control of her sexuality.
Yes,
instead of being viewed only as like a vending machine for it.
Yes, and she is like, when you hang out with her more, she kind of says like, "Oh, I see myself as kind of like some of the heroes on the Saturday morning cartoons I used to watch," and they try to make a story justification for why she looks the way she does, just like Ryuji looks like a biker kid, and some of the other characters you get will have similar, fitting outfits and personas. But it's weird that her clothing is somehow more practical when she is the objectified version in Kamoshida's mind, because she's just wearing a bathing suit, versus what she wears when she is kind of in her own superhero clothes. But, this game it walks the line between like a teen sex comedy at times and then also this super serious drama, and it is so earnest at all times that it tends to work out, even though these are probably tonally jarring. But
it is kind of funny. High school kind of is a time for a lot of people where it is both super serious and all these things, but sometimes it also is sort of stupid and horny and dumb, and sometimes those are combined, and that's I don't want to give Persona devs too much credit, because I do feel like some of it is just like, we want eye candy, but I do feel like a little bit of it, they were able to like have a genre and medium where the eye candy is a little bit more justified, just because high school kind of is that kind of time.
Yeah, and I don't want to completely condemn it, because I do think this does capture the high school experience in a pretty good way. It's just something I feel I should mention because it's happening. It definitely jumped out to me. There are multiple scenes, at least one per dungeon, where someone has to say something about An, or something weird has to happen with one of the female characters and Ryuji. And it happens all the time. And it's happened in Persona 4, it happened in Persona 3, it's happened in just about every Japanese high school related piece of media I've ever seen. So it doesn't jump out to me as much anymore, but it's mostly because I've just dealt with this kind of stuff before. I've seen Bleach. I've seen, all these different teen dramas that are also supernatural. So I just don't. It's there. Just know there'll be that level of Japanese horniness. Eventually someone's nose is going to bleed because they saw something. Eventually someone's going to see like a bra when they probably shouldn't. Maybe they'll probably go to a bathhouse at some point or something similar.
Somebody will get knocked down and their skirt will fly up with
someone
whole bloomer shot.
Someone will land on top of someone and they won't want, oh, this is crazy. I
already know because I was watching someone else play this game. There is one specific sexual dynamic that I think is a bit too far, kind of worse than some of the other ones, but we can talk about those later. Your bathhouse comment made me think of it.
Yeah, there'll be some sexual dynamics. We'll get into that later. I'm much further than you guys, and we will wait until you guys actually have some of the experience I've had. So, is there anything, like I've seen the end of Kamoshida's stuff. We'll not discuss it because Billy isn't there yet, but I think that's a good place to stop for the beginning of Persona 5. What are you guys thinking so far? How are you liking it?
So I've played Persona before. I've played a variety of their games, and to me, Persona kind of feels almost like it's kind of like the culmination of my childhood in a little bit of a way, because it kind of gives a mature adult version of Pokemon. I've been so wanting a strategically deep and gripping story that deals with mature themes, maybe not always in a mature way, but just deal with the mature themes. It feels like a version of Pokemon that I don't have to kind of feel like I'm maybe not the target audience for. And so I really like that aspect of Persona, that it gives those urges to want to play a creature collection and a strategic turn-based RPG. It gives me an outlet for that I just didn't have until relatively recently, because I only discovered Persona only a little bit ago.
Billy, what do you think?
I like the meaningful character interaction. I like the aesthetics. I like the combat. The thing that's going to make this game not as fun for me, if anything, is one of the most critical components, which is the time management. In life, I'm not that great at organization or time management where it counts sometimes. And I use games as a way to be able to explore every option and see every possible outcome, a lot of times where time is absolutely not even considered, except for how far up your game hour counter goes. And it's just done at that. So this is probably going to be the most time sensitive game that I'll play, with the exception of honestly Pikmin. And I don't know how I'm going to react to it now that this is a much deeper and much more involved. I'm just anticipating myself pulling my hair out and reloading a save and losing an hour of my play time because I really, really wanted to achieve some goal and I fucked it up somehow. And though that's something that I'm going to be self-inflicting and is not necessary to experience what the game has to offer, I'm just anticipating what I'm going to do to myself in order to ensure that I have the kind of good time that I want.
Yep. And I think so far Persona 5 is probably one of my favorites. 4, I like it more than 3. I don't know if I like it as much as 4. We'll see. I think that the moment-to-moment gameplay is more fun than 4, but some of the characters and scenarios in 4, I think, were better than anything I've seen yet in 5. So we'll see where it ultimately ends up. But at the end of the day, one of my favorite games of all time is Psychonauts. Persona plays in the exact same realm, and I like them for similar reasons. I like exploring people's mental worlds and seeing kind of the crazy re-envisionings of what people think the world looks like. It's always a treat whenever you meet a new villain or whoever's mind you're going to go into, and just what's this guy going to think the world looks like? And then seeing how they change the shadows and change the mechanics and come up with puzzles based around those mental worlds. So this game is so up my alley, and I'm going to play the shit out of it. So if you want to get in touch with the show, send us feedback, give us any tips and tricks. I'm sure Billy could use them. He would probably love to get more efficient, or Devin, and Pete needs to catch up. So if you have any tips or tricks, feedback, any questions for us, any comments, go ahead at DeepListensPod or at ThatPinguino on Twitter. DeepListens.libsyn.com is our kind of hosting site and where you can leave messages in our comments section, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com is our email account. Thank you, Billy.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm looking forward to continuing this series overall. I think it'll be a nice change of pace.
Thank you, Devin.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Till next time. Peace!